Hello everyone, this is part 7 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto looked from one end of the hallway to the other. Itachi and Kisame stared back at his red and black form, one apathetic, the other with bloodlusting excitement. Two of the most feared S-class criminals in the known shinobi world in my office. He mused aloud before looking at their attire. Ah, I see. So the reports are true then. He mused calmly before looking at the Uchiha. There really is an organization after the Biju. Itachi stepped forward. Uzumaki Naruto. He looked around the office before looking back at him. I see you have become rather important in my absence, demon of Konoha. Naruto said nothing, he merely continued to stare at the Uchiha with his cold blue eyes. The murderous prodigy spoke again. You know why we're here. He stated simply. Kisame picked it up where he let off. So we can do this the easy way, or, he grinned and placed a hand on Samahida's hilt. My way. Naruto turned his eyes to the second Akatsuki member and with speed Kisame barely caught the ninja had closed half the distance between them with one sword already ready to swing. Itachi's first instinct was to use a fire jutsu, but the problem was a, they couldn't attract too much attention and b, Kisame was in the way. So he unsheathed a wakizashi on his back and rushed forward intent on catching up to the youth. Kisame knew he wouldn't be able to unsheath Samahida in time to block and so he placed his forearm in the way. Naruto's blade dug deeply into his skin stopping at the bone. Kisame curled his lip, but showed no signs of pain. His other hand was already in a motion to cleave him with Samahida. Naruto stepped back with one leg, managing to do so in time to dodge Samahida as it came down. Wooden splinters flew as the blade hit the ground. Naruto held his blade firmly in Kisame's forearm and used his free hand, delivering two quick punches to the shark's face. He pulled his hand back and in one smooth motion he unsheathed his second scimitar, gripping the weapon in a reverse grip. A clang was heard as Itachi's wakizashi hit his blade. He pushed the blade up and swiped at the Uchiha's legs. Itachi leapt up and threw a kick at the blonde's face. Naruto leaned his head forward, dodging the kick. He then raised his blade again and hit the back of Itachi's knee with the hilt of the blade. Itachi gritted his teeth against the pain, the impact put him parallel to the ground, still in mid-air. Naruto then raised his leg and moved to kick him in the chest with an axe kick. Itachi caught the attack, using it to pivot himself in an awkward backflip, up, over the leg, and landing on his feet. Naruto then wrenched his other blade free from Kisame's forearm and leapt up just seconds before Kisame took a horizontal swing that would have cut him in half. He stuck to the roof with chakra and crisscrossed his blades to block a vertical strike from the fish-like Akatsuki member. He felt the ceiling buckle slightly beneath his feet at Kisame's raw strength. He turned and blocked another strike from Itachi. Twisting the blade around he made an opening in Itachi's stance and took it. His scimitar entered the Uchiha's stomach just as he burst into ravens, which scattered black feathers all over the place. He pushed his blade down and leapt off the roof as dozens of kunai, thrown by the Uchiha, hit the spot he had previously been occupying. As soon as he landed he was forced to block Kisame's Samahida again as he swung. Even so, the force of the blow sent him crashing through the wall into the other room. Kisame went to follow, but as soon as Naruto saw his figure through the newly made hole he catapulted back out, slamming into the blue-skinned man with a very hard shoulder tackle that sent Kisame through the opposite wall. He turned and again blocked Itachi's strike with one of his blades. He used the other to take a swipe at him but Itachi managed to block that with his wakizashi. Naruto continued to attack, his moves fast and precise. A flurry of metal and sparks was all normal individuals could see. Slash marks were formed throughout the length of the hallway as the exchange continued, eventually leading back into the office. Now with more space to maneuver Itachi could get a breather. He sidestepped as Naruto came in with a downward swing, slicing his own desk in half in the process. Itachi appeared again behind him stabbing him in the back, the wakizashi blade poking out of his chest. He growled low in his chest and delivered a hard elbow right into Itachi's gut, then raising his fist up, punched him dead in the face. Itachi recoiled from the blow, but managed to twist the blade and pull it out. Naruto turned and delivered a brutal kick to the Uchiha's gut, sending him clear across the hallway, down to the reception desk. Naruto threw his swords, stabbing them in the floor about 2 inches deep. He then made some fast hand seals and let his arm fall to his side, where 4 large snakes came from each of his sleeves. Thrusting his hands forward, the reptiles practically flew down the hallway, streaking towards the Uchiha prodigy. Itachi threw several kunai and shuriken towards the approaching reptiles, but they merely twisted themselves out of the way, hissing as they continued their charge. Itachi muttered a curse under his breath and let his eyes shift to the form of the Mangekyo. Amaterasu. Black flames exploded from his eye sockets, streaking down the hallway. The wood withered and burst into flames as the black fire passed over it, incinerating the snakes and instantly turning them into ash. Naruto released the jutsu on his snakes, and grabbed the 2 swords stabbed into the ground at either side of him. Picking them up, he focused both wind and fire chakra into each one of the blades. Kaiten. Daibakuwa no Tate. Fire release, great exploding wall. Flames came from his blades, the heat making the papers in the office behind him combust. Due to the compressed space, the wall of flames extended down the hallway, forming a virtual pillar of fire that headed for the Amaterasu. The 2 attacks met with an explosion that seemed to rock the whole tower. Naruto's flames offered resistance for a few moments before they gave way to the power of Amaterasu. Itachi covered his yes as the explosion momentarily blinded him. When the explosion finally died down, he looked and saw the entire hallway was in ruins. He was about to step forward when the ceiling behind him exploded in a shower of splinters. He spun around just as a clawed gauntlet caught him by the throat, bringing him down and pinning him against the floor. Itachi leaned his head to the side, barely avoiding the sword that stabbed itself where his forehead once was. He lifted his leg and kicked Naruto in the back, making him roll forward. Itachi got to his feet and turned, his sword already swinging. Naruto caught the blade with his metal gauntlet and pushed it down with his left hand. With the sword in his right, he took a quick stabbing motion to Itachi's face, making the Uchiha prodigy lean to the side. He pulled back and stabbed again, making Itachi lean to the other side. They continued this for a few moments, before Naruto swung horizontally. Itachi ducked under the swing, still keeping a firm grip on his wakizashi before he delivered a powerful punch to Naruto's gut, making him hunch over slightly. The Uchiha then stood up, and delivered a strong knee to the boy's face, sending the blonde Jinchuriki reeling from the blow. Itachi then grabbed him by the throat and forced him to look at him dead in the eye. Tsukiyomi. Itachi was the prodigy of the Uchiha clan, often being hailed as the one stronger than the legendary Sannin, and was the first person to wield the power of a Mangekyo Sharingan in well over a century, also knowing more ninjutsu than even Hatake Kakashi. So it was no real surprise when the Uchiha knew for a fact that the second he entered the world of the Tsukiyomi that something was not right. He didn't know what gave it away, perhaps because the world was not responding to his commands, perhaps because he couldn't feel the mental link he possessed which allowed him to control the illusion, or perhaps it was the fact that instead of facing normal Naruto, he was facing a much more sinister version of the blonde. Naruto's grin widened to almost insane proportions as he raised his claws. So this is the entertainment my container has provided me with. The Naruto chuckled to himself, his red eyes glinting in the shadows of the Tsukiyomi. Itachi suddenly knew who he was facing. The Kyuubi. The legendary demon chuckled as its grin widened. It flexed its razor-sharp claws and spoke calmly. Come boy, if you can provide me some good entertainment then I will let you leave. Itachi narrowed his eyes. He knew the chances of him beating the great demon in anything, even in the world of his Tsukiyomi, were very very slim. So he had no choice other than to play along, since dispelling the technique didn't seem to be working. He rushed forward to the Kitsune at incredible speeds, his wakizashi glinting eerily in the red lights of the Tsukiyomi. He swung with a downwards, diagonal swipe, but the Kitsune fluidly moved out of the way. Itachi looked behind him to see the grinning fox floating back. Itachi spun on his heel and rushed forward. However, instead of attacking with the wakizashi directly, he threw the weapon at his red-eyed opponent. Kyuubi swerved to the side, his smile still firmly in place. Itachi appeared in front of the Kitsune and plunged a kunai in his right collarbone and twisted it savagely. Kyuubi kept on smiling even as blood escaped the corner of his mouth. He grabbed the Uchi's forearm, holding him in place and digging his sharp claws deep into the flesh. A bright red fireball formed on the Kitsune's free hand and he slammed it into Itachi's chest, sending the Uchiha prodigy flying back. Itachi coughed up blood and clutched his chest in pain, but quickly ignored it and righted himself in mid-air, rushing back at the Kitsune with almost desperate fervor as he took out two kunai and engaged in taijutsu. Claws and metal met in furious and bloody slashes. Itachi did the best he could, but still received terrible lacerations along his forearms, his left hip, right shoulder clear across his stomach and down from the left side of his chest down to his lower right ribs. With the use of the Sharingan he managed to catch a view of an opening and seized it, shoving the Kitsune away with a harsh kick that connected to the red-eyed devil's face. The Kitsune's back hit a tree within the illusion world. Itachi rushed forward and with blinding speed he plunged 2 kunai into the Kitsune's palms, running him straight through and stabbing him deep into the bark of the tree, effectively nailing him there. Itachi pulled back and scowled as he saw the Kitsune's infuriating smile was still there, annoying the fuck out of him. 6 kunai were gripped in each hand. He let a smirk cross his lips before he threw them all, hitting the Kitsune in every major vein and artery in the human, upper torso anatomy, including both lungs, liver, kidneys, heart, stomach and throat. He was still smiling. Itachi scowled as he saw the form chuckling softly, the rise and fall of his shoulders evident from a distance. He walked over to his discarded wakizashi and gripped it firmly before walking over to the Kitsune. He stared straight into the animalistic slits that were dancing with sick glee before swiping the great demon's head clean off, blood left as if it was a fountain. Itachi let his eyes follow the head before he spun and kicked it as it fell, sending it to another tree, his wakizashi following shortly behind, plunging into the Kitsune's skull. He was still smiling. Itachi resisted the urge to shudder. Turning his back on the corpse he began focusing on dispelling his technique. It didn't work. The tiny hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he heard a chuckle coming from behind him. Oh, but little Uchiha, I said that you could leave, when I was done having my fun. Came a very dark and demonic voice from all around him. Itachi spun around to where the corpse should have been. Note that the key word in that last sentence is, should. Only his wakizashi and various kunai remained embedded in the trees. He turned back around and saw the red chakra forming a humanoid shape which quickly revealed the fanged grin and glowing red eyes, only this time they seemed much more demonic as they glowed with an unholy light. And I'm not done having my fun yet. Itachi leapt back, in a somersault, reaching his wakizashi he gripped it in a reverse grip and rushed the Kitsune again. Kyubi rushed forward as well, his claws flashing. They passed each other in an instant, appearing on the opposite sides of where they respectively were. Kyubi straightened and smiled just before his arms fell off, cut cleanly from the body. Itachi looked over his shoulder and smirked himself, but it died as red chakra shot from the wounds and quickly regenerated the lost limbs. Kyubi turned around, its unholy red eyes and gleaming fangs were the only things visible of its face. Looks like I failed that time. But don't worry little Uchiha, we still have 71 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds to go. Naruto, knowing that Itachi was currently trapped in a world of his own creation, reared back his blades in preparation to kill the murderous prodigy. Just then Kisame crashed through the wall in front of him to his left, Samahida already swinging, while his free hand grabbed Itachi and pulled him away. Naruto leapt over the blade in a cartwheel-like motion, landing on his feet, he backhanded Kisame in the face. Kisame snarled and caught his wrist before he pulled it back. He spun around, taking Naruto with him in the motion and slammed him against the wall. Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. Kisame turned again and blocked the 2 blades that would have taken a chuck out of his ribcage. Pushing the blonde off, he then swung, aiming for the boy's upper torso. Naruto ducked and then moved into Kisame's follow-up swing, close enough to render his large blade ineffective, and plunged his sword into Kisame's stomach. The shark man, however, had a slightly different anatomy than humans. The blade would have pierced his kidneys, causing a painful death, if he had been a normal human, but his kidneys were a bit higher than normal humans and so, Naruto ended up not hitting anything vital. Kisame punched the blonde square in the face, sending him crashing into what remained of his desk. He was about to step forward but then he heard a thud behind him. He turned and received the biggest shock of his life that night. Uchiha Itachi, the most feared missing nin alongside Orochimaru, was laying on the ground, blood seeping from his mouth. His pupils were dilated and the Sharingan slowly faded into black obsidian. The shark man sensed the approaching presences and knew this was one fight he couldn't win. He hoisted his partner over his shoulder and both immediately vanished in red wisps of smoke. Naruto calmly walked out of the rubble and took his blade from the floor, sheathing it. He rubbed his sore jaw and managed to turn his gaze into one of apathy just as the Anbu and Junin entered the room. The masked individuals looked at the wrecked room and turned to their as of yet unofficial Hokage for an explanation. Naruto adjusted his jaw, and spoke. I want all Anbu search teams to comb the village. Your targets are two S-class criminals, Uchiha Itachi and Hoshikage Kisame. Capture alive if possible, if not dispose of them. He looked around the room once, and get someone to clean this mess up. Yes sir, right away. The Anbu captain saluted before they all vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto rubbed his forehead. He would definitely have to up the training programs. What good were the guards if they arrived after their leader was dead? Flames. Deadly, purifying flames. She had been here before. That night at the Hyuga compound. Her mother, a woman she loved with all her heart. She didn't know what had happened. One moment they were simply talking, the next, fire. Fire came as if the gates of hell itself had opened, allowing them forth into the world of men. She didn't know what had happened next. It was all too fast. But she could remember. She was lying on the floor, blood covered her form and her arm was throbbing with pain. She had looked up and her father along with her brother were fighting someone. She didn't see his face. Only the blood-red cloak that covered him. She stood, struggling against the pain that shot through her. She had started running towards them, her feet pounding against the moist earth. She ran as fast as she could, but the distance seemed endless. She remembered, hearing a muffled scream. The darkness in her vision faded and she saw the person in red, holding her brother by his face. She had heard her father yell out something, a curse most likely, but she didn't hear it. All she heard was the sickening crack of her brother's skull and the blood that she saw flow from both his left and right temples, down his face, his eyes, his ears, dripping down his chin to the cold floor below. She had seen red then. Her only thought was the objective, to kill the one in the red cloak. To stop the flames. She had rushed in then, and both her and her father fought with everything they had: kunai, blades, shuriken, explosive notes, jutsu, genjutsu. Everything they had in their arsenal. But it was over so quickly. She had felt a terrible pain across her stomach. When she looked down, she was kneeling, and blood was traveling down her waist, to her knees, and into the floor, pulling where her knees met the floor. She clutched the bleeding injury with her hands, and looked up, as her father's body hit the floor with a dull thud. His eyes, panicked and fearful, turned themselves onto her and he whispered one word. Run. Before the blade pierced his neck. She looked up again and met the burning, blood-red eyes of that monster, and for the first time in a long time, felt true terror, a gripping fear that tightened around her chest and froze her in place. As the gaze did not break, her father's last word continued to scream in her mind. Run. 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 Run, 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 run. Finally, she did. She stood and she fled. As fast as her feet could carry her, she fled, and the screams and cries of other ninja continued to reach her ears long after she flew from that place, before finally fading into nothingness. But those eyes, those terrible crimson eyes of hell, that held within them the same glow of the burning flames around her, those stayed with her. And they would never fade. The young girl awoke painfully, much like the last two times she'd been conscious. Her mind was clouded, but she knew the surroundings were somewhat familiar, so she managed to stop her growing panic. She sat up weakly, vaguely recalling that it was much easier now than what she had remembered it to be the last time. She looked around, ignoring her blonde hair that fell over her eyes, obscuring her vision slightly. She found a black hired woman sleeping on a chair a few feet away, a book loosely held in her hand as her soft snores reached the girl's ears. The creak of a door opening startled her and she turned to see a blonde-haired woman entering. She paused for a moment as their eyes locked before she made a gesture for her to keep quiet. She walked over to the sleeping brunette and removed the book from her slack grip. She set it on the table before picking her up and setting the girl down on the couch. Standing up, she walked over to her. Sitting at the edge of the bed, she looked to the younger blonde, with a look that managed to be somber, sympathetic and serious at the same time. How do you feel? Akina looked down. Fine, I guess, she muttered. Do you have pain anywhere? Tsunade ached again. Like your head, chest. Anywhere at all? She ventured carefully. Akina shook her head slowly. No. Tsunade nodded. From her body language and verbal responses, along with her injuries, it didn't take a genius to know she had been in a terrible fight and had most likely lost someone important to her. Would you like to get cleaned up? Yes, please. The younger girl responded. Tsunade nodded, helping her throw her feet over the edge of the bed. The girl tried to stand on her own, but her legs, after almost 2 days of pure abuse and one more week of no use made her limbs like jelly. Sunad rushed forward and steadied her. Whoa there, you can't be moving on your own yet. The older blonde said sympathetically, and placed a glowing green hand of chakra onto the girl's stomach as she saw her wince and instinctively place a hand over the area in pain. Shizune told me your name's Akina. Is that right? The girl, now identified as Akina, nodded. Sunad smiled. Good. My name, in case you didn't know, is Sunad. Akina's head snapped up towards her, her crystalline blues widening in surprise. Of the legendary Sannin. Sunad nodded and smiled before she slung the girl's arm over her shoulder and gently led her to the bathroom. Come on, let's get you cleaned up. It was only a few minutes later that Sunad had the tub almost full with steaming hot water. She dipped her hand into the steaming liquid, testing the temperature. Really? I don't want to be a bother, I'll do it myself. The blonde girl stated meekly. Sunad stood and dried her hands and walked over to the young girl. Give me your hand, she said, extending her own hand. Akina promptly did the same. Sunad gripped the younger girl's hand in her own. Squeeze my hand as much as you can, she ordered firmly. The younger blonde tried, but she could barely clench her fingers. Sunad spoke up again. You've just woken up from an anesthesia-induced sleep, the effects still haven't worn off, you could trip and bash your head in there, so I'll help you until the muscle relaxants wear off. Don't worry, I've seen much worse bodies than yours. The older medic said with a sly grin. Akina blushed but nodded rather reluctantly, and began undressing, allowing Sunad to help ease her into the shower. She hissed as the steaming liquid hit her stomach wound, which was now nothing more than a gash with dry blood and some signs of healing. It would definitely scar. She shoved her head down, wetting her hair before rising again. Sunad sighed and sat down on a small stool. Listen, I don't want to sound too forward or anything, but the not knowing is killing me. I know you came from Konoha, your headband and ID identify you as a genin, graduated just 2 years ago. What happened? Did a mission go wrong or something? She shook her head, she really didn't want to talk about it, but another part of her wanted to say everything. She then remembered that was Sunad, one of the legendary Sannin. She hugged her head, letting her now wet mop of blonde hair obscure her eyes from view. I don't really know all the specifics. All I know is that things started getting crazy after the Chunin exam. Sunad listened through the story with bated breath. Many of the things she had just heard just threw her for a loop. Both Sarutobi and Orochimaru were dead. A kid, the alleged QB container and Konoha's own personal demon on a leash, had overthrown the council, and nearly half of her home village's population was either dead, Kia, or missing Nin. And her last remaining teammate Jiraiya had helped in this. This was just too much. She shook her head and spoke. What will you do once you're healed? The girl tensed for a moment before speaking, her voice was an angry whisper. I'm going to train. As long as it takes, I'll train until I'm strong enough, then, I'll kill him. Sunad took a deep breath, closed her eyes and rinsed off the last of the soap on the younger girl's back before she moved to pick her up. Wait. Sunad paused listening to her. I think I can do it on my own, she said slowly. Sunad shook her head, the after effects would take another 2 or 3 hours to wee. She stopped as the girl's brow creased with effort as she used both her arms and her legs to stand up. Sunad moved forward and helped her stand the rest of the way. But she knew something was up with that display. She never messed up dosages, or medical times, the girl should be nothing more than a limp hunk of meat. She decided to store that in the back of her mind and began helping her to dress. When Sunad emerged with Akina, Shizune was beginning to wake up. Oh, I'm sorry Sunad-sama, I didn't mean to fall asleep, she said, standing and bowing her head apologetically. It's all right Shizune, can you keep Akina company? I think I need to get some sake, the older woman said half-heartedly. Shizune nodded, immediately knowing that her master was distressed, and let her eyes travel to the younger girl. She could be no older than 13 or 14, her hair was a dark shade of blonde, and in a certain light could be seen as orange. It was somewhat spiky, with a few bangs over her eyes and the rest cropped back in a spiky ponytail. She was wearing a simple tank top now, with beige shorts and black ninja sandals. Shizune smiled at her and she tried to smile back, but failed slightly. The brunette moved in and helped lead the girl to the bed where she sat down with a pained grunt. Sunad left them, she really needed a drink. Shizune smiled at the girl. Are you hungry, or thirsty, Akina-san? She asked politely. Akina was about to say no, since she didn't really want to impose, but her stomach decided to speak for itself, letting out a very loud, very embarrassing growl. She blushed, her cheeks turning a healthy pink. Shizune laughed light-heartedly. I'll take that as a yes then. Akina smiled slightly and nodded, as long as she could distract herself. Shizune walked over to the kitchen and grabbed some half-warm takeout food, not exactly the healthiest choice, but it would get food into her stomach. Shizune walked over and handed the girl some of the leftover lo mein soon it hadn't finished the other day. Akina, despite the food being cold, practically inhaled it. Shizune blinked at the way the food simply vanished from the plate. She laughed somewhat awkwardly, but she was spared further speculation and embarrassment as Akina spoke up. Where did Tsunade-sama go? She asked, looking around. Shizune shrugged. Don't worry, Tsunade-senpai can handle herself. She may have gone to a bar or... Shizune suddenly paled and Akina immediately grew alarmed. Shizune-san. What's wrong? The next thing the blonde knew, a tornado had suddenly torn through the apartment building and Shizune was nowhere to be seen, only her voice could be heard in the wind. Gotta go. Akina blinked owlishly at the spectacle. What? Seeing as how she was going to receive no answer, she decided to rest, but as soon as she let her lids fall over her eyes, those blood-red orbs flashed into view and she sat straight up. She gulped down her fear, and immediately replaced it with anger and determination. She would get stronger. Naruto let a slow smile dance on his lips, as he read the reports from the Sound 5, they had returned with nearly double what he had asked for. Indeed, there were several that merely wanted to kill him, but Abiki's cross-references had pointed them all out and had them discreetly eliminated. Many of the senior Leafs, meaning the people that had been born and raised in the Leaf village, did not take kindly to the newcomers. Naruto now had Root Anbu patrolling the inside of the village to stop fights from breaking out. While they were few, he did not need the extra headache. While those new batch of Chunin and Junin were getting settled in, another report had arrived. This was Kakashi and Anko's report, of the Mist Village. And the intelligence was quite pleasing. He chuckled before clicking a button on his intercom. Bring me Hatake Kakashi, Yuhi Kurenai, Aberrane Shibi and Hyuga Hinata. Yes, Naruto-sama. Naruto shifted through more mission reports when one of the Hyuga who were working administration in the building walked in and bowed. Naruto-sama, the ninja you requested have arrived. He nodded. Good. Send them in. The Hyuga nodded and bowed again before walking out. Moments later, Kakashi, Kurenai, the Aberrane clan head Shibi and Hinata, clad in robes befitting her as the new matriarch, walked in. Good. You're all here. He drawled, standing. The reason I have called you all is because I have decided to begin the first stages of M plans. And the 4 of you are necessary for it. We will head to Kiri. If all goes according to plan, then the Mist Village will fall right into our hands without even a single battle between our forces. Everyone looked at each other incredulously and was seriously considering that their leader had gone mad, but they had said the same thing when H proposed to attack the Hyuga compound on his own. So they decided to grant him the benefit of the doubt. Shibi was the one to answer. And how will you accomplish that, Naruto-sama? Kakashi, please explain the situation Kiri is in right now. Naruto commanded. The copy ninja straightened and spoke. When we went to Kiri, Anko and I quickly learned the obvious. The place was practically in ruins, the Mizukage's forces on one side and the remainder of the 7 swordsmen on the other. The war has been around for a few years now, so the civilians in that area are all either miserable or drafted into shinobi duty. While the 7 swordsmen have stronger troops, they have less resources and funds than the Mizukage, which has slowly been giving him the advantage. Right now, it looks as if in a few months' time the 7 swordsmen will be defeated. The shinobi on both sides are complacent. One side believes they should surrender instead of die needlessly, while the other side is sick and tired of the fighting. Naruto nodded. We will use the complacency and civil unrest of the population to our advantage. As Kakashi stated, the side with the 7 swordsmen is losing simply because they have less resources from which to draw upon. We will alleviate that problem. Shibi nodded. I see. Then they will be in our debt. Naruto nodded. We will provide them assistance. In exchange, they cannot name a Godai Mizukage, and instead they must name a Junin Oroban, much like Kusa and Am. Our ninja will oversee operations there. The overseers, as they will be called, will consist of a team led by a Junin. they will be switched once every year so they do not begin to feel too attached to the Kiri Nin, and the Kiri Junin commander will hand them reports of the village situations once every 3 months. The overseers will also make sure there are no movements against us, especially not by the Junin Oyabun. Kurenai spoke up now. Naruto-sama, you cannot possibly believe that they will simply hand over control of their country. Even if they did, they would only bide their time to stab us in the back when their strength returns to them. She argued. Naruto nodded. Both are good points. However, not every plan is without risks. This is simply the one with the least amount of long-term complications. Fighting a war with Kiri will diminish us to the point where we will not even be able to sustain ourselves, much less conquer the 4 shinobi villages. This will not only increase our influence in the south, it will also add to our income, manpower, and will grant us control of Kiri's powerful navy, which can only be rivaled by Kumo, and even then Kumo's is much smaller and less experienced. Shibi nodded. I see. But I am still confused. Kakashi and Kurenai's roles are already stated, but what possible benefit would my presence and Hinata-san's presence grant? You are for a much more practical use than Hinata, I admit. You are to use your entire hive of Kikaichu and actively spy on the enemy, granting us intelligence at a very quick rate, defensive weak points, strong Junin locations, as well as where the Mizukage is at all times. And me? Hinata asked, ticked off that he had said she was not to be of practical use. While you will not be serving a practical use, or combat use at this time, your use will be placed on your political value. Once we do this, word will spread, and word will reach the other ninja villages quite quickly. It will not be long before they also hear that the Hyuga clan head, Hiashi, is dead and has been replaced by a girl no older than 13. Many will think that the Hyuga clan has grown weak and will therefore think that we are weak. By going on this mission, you will handle yourself as a clan headshot and make the Kiri ninja believe that you are most certainly not weak. Which will reduce the likeliness that Kumo or Iwa get any ideas of attacking. In order to make sure you are ready, I will grant you a signed leave of absence from active duty. Kakashi will train you in these 2 weeks before we depart. Hinata looked to Kakashi, who seemed a little surprised but smiled at her nonetheless. Shibi spoke up next. Naruto-sama, I request to take another of my clan members on this mission. Which one and for what reasons? My son, Aberrane Shino. I believe that he could use the experience this mission has to offer. While I can extend my Kikaichu to cover most if not all of the village at one time, it takes a great amount of concentration. One that my son has never used before. You can think of this as somewhat of a training exercise for him. Naruto thought about it for a moment before he finally replied. Is your son at least Chunin level in stealth on his own? Shibi paused before nodding. Yes. I believe he may even be a little above that if he tries hard and the conditions are right. He could even be considered high Chunin. Naruto nodded before speaking again. Very well. Now, if no one else has any questions, then you may leave. Make preparations to depart in 17 days. Hinata, Kurenai and Shibi bowed and began leaving, Kakashi granting the Hyuga the time and place of where they would meet. After they had left, Kakashi turned to Naruto. What is it, Hitaki? Naruto said, leaning back in his chair. You know, after you take Kiri, if you even get it, you can't just immediately go and attack another country. Do you take me for a fool, Hitaki? Naruto scoffed. I must first stabilize my power in Kiri, and then gain the adequate number of troops, supplies, funds and resources before I begin another campaign. Besides, he looked out the balcony towards the marketplace where the people were going about their business. I know that a normal shinobi can only take so much combat before he finally snaps. He looked to the Sharingan wielder's eye. Isn't that what you were going to say? Kakashi leaned back in his own chair and sighed. Yeah. He looked to Naruto again. You say the words but you don't really understand them, do you? Naruto was silent for a long while before he spoke again. My entire life has been battle. I fought battle after battle until I was feared by all, as a devil in human form. He looked to Kakashi. Even you, to some degree, see me as a demon, don't you, Hitaki? He smirked as Kakashi didn't answer. No, Kakashi, I do not understand. But perhaps that will change someday. He mused silently before standing and leaving his office. Minato-sensei. He mentally sighed. What have we done to your legacy? Meanwhile, in a dark lair, 7 robed figures gathered together. Are you serious? One voice, which belonged to a silver-haired man with a 3-bladed scythe and a Kumo forehead protector, asked incredulously. He actually beat the both of you. While also defeating Itachi's Tsukiyomi. Another voice, this one coming from a very tall man with pupilless eyes, a face mask and a bandana with the Waterfall Village symbol over his head. That is disturbing. Another, one with a scorpion tail and hunched form, spoke up. No, that's fucking hilarious, yeah. Another voice, this one coming from a blonde rock nin, snickered. Kisum growled. You wanna come down here and say that you clay using transvestite? He said as he moved to grab Samahida. You fish-faced freak. Deodara snarled, moving his hand to one of his pouches. Enough, both of you. A female voice spoke up, entering the room. She looked to the still silent leader. I have treated him. He will hopefully awaken in a few days' time. The leader nodded and turned to one member, which looked like a Venus flytrap. Zetsu, I want you to gather as much information as you can on the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. His strength is troubling, but nothing we cannot handle with the proper information. Zetsu bowed before speaking. Of course. He seemed to fade away as the leader turned to the rest of the group. This changes nothing. We will continue with our plans accordingly. Do not approach the Kyuubi Jinchuriki in open combat unless the odds are very favorable. They each nodded before silently fading into the darkness. The leader let his eyes travel to the giant statue of a bound humanoid figure in silent contemplation. Uzumaki Naruto, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Will you be the one, I wonder? Will you be the one that brings this world into ruin? Tsunade was currently on her 9th bottle of sake, drunk as hell. She was drinking for a number of reasons. One was the death of her sensei, another was simply for the situation that had fallen over her home. Jiraiya was yet another reason. She felt sort of betrayed by him. How could he side with someone like Naruto? He couldn't possibly believe that he would succeed in his ambition, so there had to be another reason. Another major reason was that girl, Akina. She reminded Tsunade a little of herself back when she had lost Dan and Nawaki. Throughout her entire story, Tsunade felt the memories that she had long ago tried to bury resurface. In a nutshell, she could relate to the girl. And she hated it. Just as she was about to reach for the 10th bottle, a hand firmly grasped her wrist. You know, Haim, that's really bad for your health. She looked at the silver-haired man that stared at her with a neutral expression. Jiraiya. She glared. Naruto and his team of 5 Junin and 2 Genin silently skulked through the shadows of the night near the hidden mist village. Kakashi was leading the team through the proper route, while Kurenai had placed a strong genjutsu over all of them to keep them hidden. Currently, everything was going according to plan. They had slipped past the border guards with little problem along with the troops belonging to the current Mizukage and were near the main headquarters of the remaining 7 swordsmen. Kakashi suddenly had a strange thought occur to him. Naruto, who did you leave in charge of the village while we're gone? I remember that Jiraiya wasn't around. Naruto paused for a moment in his stride before continuing rather quickly. You need not worry, Kakashi, it is being handled accordingly. Kakashi shrugged, not giving it a second thought. If Naruto said it was being handled properly, then it was being handled properly. Meanwhile, back in Konoha, a certain purple-haired Junin growled low in her throat, her eyes flashing a gold yellow much like her old sensei as she glared at the pile of paperwork in front of her. Oh, that fucker was gonna pay for this. It wasn't long afterwards the Konoha nin could see a Japanese-style mansion at the top of some shrine-like steps. The shifting shadows and thick mist surrounding the area gave way that several Junin which were adept at the silent killing technique were currently present and on guard around the compound. Naruto gestured for his subordinates to come closer. Kurenai, drop your genjutsu, we've arrived. The secrecy was only needed so that the Mizukage would not catch wind of this. The genjutsu mistress hesitated for a moment before nodding, and the genjutsu around them fell. Naruto turned and began making his way up the steps of the shrine. It wasn't long before mist encircled around him and the 5 individuals behind him. He stopped as he reached the top of the stairs. The mist dissolved and roughly 24 ninja were now surrounding them. What business do 6-leaf ninja have here in Kiri? Asked a large man as he stepped forward. He was about 5 feet 11 to 6 feet. He had a customized chest plate armor with sleeves that were fit more as a priest's robes, dark blue in color and baggy samurai-style pants. He had short straight hair and a full beard and mustache. He also had 3 swords along his back, 2 crisscrossed and 1 going straight down along his spinal column. Naruto allowed his eyes to travel over the group of Kiri nin before he spoke up again. We have come to speak to the leader of this rebellion. He answered. The man that had approached them looked him over. Your names? He demanded. Naruto glanced back at Kakashi, gesturing to the silver-haired man. Hatake Kakashi of Konoha, copy ninja. He looked to Shibi. Aberrane Shibi and Aberrane Shino, the clan head and heir of the Aberrane clan respectively. He gestured to Kurenai. Yuhi Kurenai, the Genjutsu mistress. And finally Hinata. Hyuga Hinata, the newly appointed clan head of the Hyuga clan. Mutters arose at that, whispers reached them, not the least of which boiled down to, but she's just a kid. Throughout the small barrage of mutters and whispered disdain, Hinata forced herself to remain apathetic to the world. She would not respond to this simply because that is not how a clan head was supposed to act. Taunts can be ignored and you act only when there's no other choice. At least that's what she had been taught. The commander silenced them all with a harsh shout. Shut it. He looked back at Naruto. And you? Uzumaki Naruto. He paused, the words stuck on his tongue for an instant. God, I'm Hokage of Konohagakure. Tsunade stared at her ex-teammate's looming form for several seconds before she was able to fully comprehend just who was standing before her. She glared and roughly pulled her hand away from his grasp, bringing the sake bottle to her lips. She took a huge swig and slammed the rice wine on the table. What are you doing here? She snarled. Jiraiya ignored her harsh tone and calmly sat down, serving himself some sake and drinking. I just came to talk, he said, placating. About what? Making me join your little world-conquering club too? She scoffed, taking another swing. Jiraiya paused before he drank some more sake. So you've heard, have you? I suppose that girl told you, eh? He stated simply. The slug Sannin narrowed her eyes. You've been spying on us. It was no real secret what the Sannin had specialized in. Tsunade in medical techniques and taijutsu. Jiraiya in sealing techniques and summoning techniques that could be used in conjunction with ninjutsu, and Orochimaru in ninjutsu and kinjutsu. Out of all of them, Orochimaru was the best one in stealth, followed closely by Jiraiya and then Tsunade. So it was not too unbelievable that Jiraiya could remain hidden from her presence if he really wanted to. Jiraiya nodded to her question. Yeah, I have. He looked at her then. And as you've guessed, I did come here in hopes of you joining us. Her hand tightened around the bottle and a small crack formed on it as it strained under the pressure. How dare you? She spat. I have no real love for the Leaf Village. But you would burn it down, all in the name of this ridiculous notion of peace. Her glare was so intense Jiraiya thought that she would seriously lash out at him. After a moment or two she relaxed, if only slightly. It won't work. And you disappoint me for thinking for a moment that it would. Get out. She turned her head, refusing to even look at him. Jiraiya stared at her with one of the most serious faces anyone had ever seen on his face. After a good long while he spoke. I know that you don't really want to talk about the wars we fought, but I feel that this has to be said. He saw her tense and grip the bottle again. One subject that was nearly taboo around Tsunade were the battles between Kiri and Iwa that killed her brother Naoki and her ex-lover Dan respectively. But nevertheless he continued on with a steady, even voice. Think about it, Tsunade. Jiraiya pleaded again. You and I know it better than anyone. First a war with Kiri, 15 years later a war with Iwa, then a minor skirmish with Kumo, and now a battle with Suna and Oto that took Sarutobi-sensei. No matter how many treaties, agreements, alliances and policies we make, they are a fragile alliance at best, which breaks almost every 2 decades and more innocents are lost. But this is something that can bring peace for far longer than just some signed treaty. And if we do things properly, perhaps even centuries of peace can be achieved. Just think of it, Tsunade, no one will ever again have to go through what you went through with Naoki and Dan. He was using low blows to her defenses and he knew it, but as a man once said, the ends justify the means. Tsunade meanwhile felt some of her bitterness ebb away as the words reached her ears. She remembered the pain she went through at the loss of her brother. Her father had taken to the bottle and her mother had fallen into a pit of despair. Both losing themselves in their respective pain. Her father, due to the newly developed addiction, fucked up on a mission. Next day, she gets a note, no more dad. Her mother didn't take it well, and one day she went to sleep and simply didn't wake up. Then Dan had come. She had been burying herself into her work, devoting herself entirely into training in hopes of pushing the memories away from her mind. It had worked to some degree, but looking back at it now, she would have eventually snapped from the strain. He had arrived then and had returned some light into the bleak world hers had become. Just when she was pulling herself out of her depression with Dan helping her, he had to go and die too. To think that should this boy succeed, that no one ever had to go through what she went through again, chipped away at her resolve. Jiraiya saw the small sliver of hopefulness in her eyes and hid a smirk of triumph. But soon her eyes grew guarded as a small voice made itself known in the back of her head. What about that girl Akina? She's the same as you. She lost everything to him. And he'll do it to more people. She's just the first of many broken families. And in the end it will all be for nothing because his ambition is completely impossible. Jiraiya noticed the change in her and stood, deciding to make a tactical retreat. I'll give you 3 days to think it over, Sunad. That said, he placed his money on the table and left the bar and his former teammate to the chilling night air. Naruto and the Konoha nin stood in a room with a large table in front of them. 4 Kiri nins were flanking them, 2 on each side with their commander standing along the opposite corner of the room. After a few minutes the sliding door directly in front of them opened, revealing a woman with messy, shoulder-length brown hair wearing white battle robes with a gold dragon around it and a strange symbol on her back. 2 short swords were strapped horizontally along the back of her waist. She had a silver tiara on her head replacing the forehead protector and had the look of a seasoned war veteran even though she could not be older than her mid-30s. Hidetada. She barked out gruffly. Who are these people? The bearded man that had been leading them, Hidetada apparently, answered her. This is apparently the Gondime Hokage and his personal escort. She looked immediately Naruto. Just by the way he looked at her, she could tell he, above the others, was probably the most dangerous. She raised an eyebrow. The Gondime Hokage. I thought that old geezer the Sandaime was still in power. So what happened? He kicked and the leaf didn't have anyone other than some brat to take his place. She snorted and then stared at the black void that shadowed his face with a dead serious expression. What the hell are you leafs doing here? She asked bluntly. Naruto spoke simply. We have come here to negotiate with you. She crossed her arms in front of her chest. About what? Naruto decided that since she would skip the formalities, so would he. Let us make things clear. You and I both know that without additional assistance you will lose this war against the current Mizukage. We are willing to provide the economical assistance you require. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. And what do you desire in exchange? Naruto glanced around. Let us speak in private. She paused for a moment before nodding, making a slight hand gesture. The Kiri nin filed out with the Konoha nin trailing behind them. When the door was closed and everyone was out of earshot, Naruto turned his icy blues onto the woman leading this rebellion. As I stated before, we are willing to provide the resources necessary for you to gain an advantage in this conflict, and as you have guessed, we do have conditions, namely 2. She nodded, telling him to continue. The first is quite simple. Since your village will be of no use to me or my goals if you end up destroying your military force, I am to take full control of your troops. Excuse me, she said, half surprised, half outraged. She bared her teeth. Absolutely not. If you refuse, then I will merely walk away and you will lose this war. Naruto stated simply. For him, there was no negotiation for this. For this served 2 purposes to him. The first was the reason he had stated to her. And as for the second, he needed the respect and fear of the general population of the Kiri nin. This was the quickest way to achieve either objective. She glared at him heatedly, her lips curled back in a sneer. She seemed to struggle with herself for a moment. In the end she looked like she had just forced down a very nasty looking and disgusting piece of meat before she slowly nodded. And the second condition is that once this war is over, you will hand over all matters concerning Kiri's economic and military institutions to me. There will be no Gondime Mizukage and Kiri is to become a territory of Konoha. Her eyes widened in shock and she replied without even thinking. Absolutely not. Naruto closed his eyes. He had been expecting that. A silence descended on him before she spoke. I will agree to the first term but never the second. You will just have to renegotiate. Naruto let a slow smirk tug at his lips. She needed help and she knew it. Apparently she was a good warrior but a bad politician. She had already made the first mistake. No, he stated solemnly. My terms are completely non-negotiable. I am interested in Kiri for its naval ports. In its prime, Kiri easily dominated the entire Eastern Sea. Now there are various ways for me to go about this. You and the Mizukage are of very little consequence. This is the easiest course of action. However, since you are not interested, I will merely take my leave. That said, he turned and gripped the sliding door in preparation to leave when her voice, filled with veiled hate and resentment, reached his ears. Wait. His eyes flashed red as he allowed a slow smirk to cross his features. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.